All right, let's talk about something that can feel, well, a little intimidating and frankly pretty confusing. The UK's House of Lords. You know, the debate around it seems to pop up all the time, but it always feels like we're just talking in circles. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into why that is, and maybe, just maybe, find a whole new way of looking at the problem.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. If you have ever tuned into a conversation about the House of Lords, I guarantee you've heard this question. Is it an anachronism, this bizarre, outdated relic from a totally different time? Or is it a vital safeguard, the thing that protects us, a necessary check on political power? It feels like we've been stuck on this one question forever.
But what if that's the whole problem? What if that simple, black and white choice is the very reason the conversation never actually goes anywhere? The core idea we're going to explore today is that this question, it's a trap. It's a dead end, and it's stopping us from seeing what's really going on.
So why do I say it's a trap? Well, to really get that, we have to start by admitting how most of us feel when we even try to think about the House of Lords.
Let's be honest, it's just a mess, right? It's all tangled up in tradition, these weird arcane rules, and literally centuries of political baggage. So it's no wonder that trying to find one single clean solution feels completely impossible. But that feeling isn't a mistake. It's actually a symptom of a much deeper confusion. We're trying to solve a problem without even agreeing on what the problem is.
Okay, so how do we untangle this knot? Well, the key insight here is to realize we're not actually dealing with one giant problem. Nope, we're dealing with three totally separate issues that have been smashed together for decades.
And this, right here, is the most important part. By lumping all of this stuff together, we've made the whole thing seem unsolvable. But the second you start to pull those strands apart, the path forward gets surprisingly clear. So what are these three hidden problems we keep talking over?
First up, there's the question of ethics. The House of Lords often becomes this default place where we debate the really big moral questions. Things like the long-term impact of AI, or really complex social issues. These are huge decisions about our values, and they just don't fit neatly into the fast-paced political scrum of the House of Commons.
Second, there's the need for expertise. Think about it. Our political system basically hits the reset button every few years with an election. But really complex systems, like, say, the economy or public health, they operate on much, much longer timelines. The Lords, because its members are often there for a long time, becomes this kind of reservoir of deep institutional memory and specialized knowledge. It offers a perspective that looks beyond the next election cycle.
And finally, number three, there's the role of the upper chamber itself. This is the big constitutional question we almost never get to. What is a second chamber actually for in a modern democracy? How much power should it have? How independent does it need to be to actually do its job? And crucially, how much democratic legitimacy does it need to use that power?
Now here's where it gets really interesting. The moment you stop trying to solve all three of these problems with one single silver bullet, a whole new menu of options just opens up.
All of a sudden, you're not locked into one all-or-nothing reform package anymore. You can start thinking about how to best handle ethics, expertise, and the role of the chamber separately. And this gives us the flexibility to actually design a system that works for each of those needs. And this table just illustrates that shift perfectly. Right now, ethics gets dealt with kind of unevenly and awkwardly. Expertise shows up pretty much by chance, depending on who gets appointed. And the Lords itself is basically frozen. But if we separate them, we can start designing things deliberately. We could create a dedicated space just for ethical oversight. We could create a formal, non-political bench of experts. And then we can have a real grown-up debate about whether the main chamber should be appointed, elected, or some kind of mix.
And that is the absolute key. Deciding to create a formal group of experts doesn't automatically mean the rest of the chamber has to be elected. Or choosing a fully appointed chamber doesn't mean you can't also have a powerful, separate ethics council. The solutions are no longer tied to each other. We're free to mix and match.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it leads us to a much more productive and, frankly, a much more interesting conversation about what we actually want from our government.
Look, the point of this isn't to make everyone agree. That's never going to happen. The point is to make sure we're disagreeing about the right things. When the real choices and their consequences are out in the open, we can have an honest debate about our priorities. Things like, do we really value expertise more than direct democratic accountability? Let's argue about that.
So what does this look like? Well, instead of that old, tired anachronism versus safeguard fight, we can start debating the real trade-offs.
We can have a real conversation about legitimacy versus independence. We can argue about whether we want our government to be faster or more cautious. Do we design a system for absolute clarity or one that allows for more flexibility? These are the questions that actually matter.
And that brings us to the final and most crucial point. We need to zoom out for a second, away from the tiny details of the House of Lords, to something much more fundamental about how we govern ourselves.
This quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. All the technical details about Lords reform, they're really just a symptom. The real issue here is so much bigger.
Because here's the truth, our democracy already depends on these three things just to function. We need ethical oversight, we need deep expertise, and we desperately need to think beyond the next election. The only problem is right now we're getting all of that by accident, not by design.
And so, that's the real question this whole reframing leaves us with. And it isn't just about the House of Lords anymore, is it? It's a question for our entire democracy. Are we happy to let these absolutely vital functions happen by chance, hidden away inside a tangled, confusing old institution? Or are we finally ready to untangle the problem and start building a system that deliberately and openly makes space for them? Once you see the choice that clearly, you really have to ask, which one are we going to choose?